The Natalia ISD Board of Trustees will hold our regular meeting beginning at 6:30 p.m. in the District Conference Center in the Natalia Junior High on Tuesday, August 11th. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance to the American and Texas flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pledge to the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, to Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible.
Ask if you'll bow for a moment of prayer. Dear God, I thank you for this day. Thank you for letting us gather here today to conduct business for the district. I pray that you'll be with each of our administration, our teachers and staff as they prepare for a tough and challenging school year. I pray that the parents in our community will be understanding and supportive of what we're trying to do and accomplish for our students, and that is to keep them healthy. I pray that you'll be with us tonight as decisions are made. Bless those that are not here and cannot be with us, and I pray that everybody has a safe travel home in Jesus' name. I'd like to welcome everybody for attending our meeting tonight. We do have 5 board members present. We do not have Ms. Rodriguez here or Mr. Almendaez at this time. We do have our school attorney, one of our school attorneys, Ms. Elizabeth Neely here, as well as some other folks that are for special presentations. Thank you for being here, as well as our administration. We will start with the item number 2, public hearing regarding the proposed 2021 tax rate. Ms. Riddle.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, board members, and Dr. Calavo. The purpose of this public meeting is to discuss the school district's tax rate, which will be adopted. Public participation in the discussion is invited. The Chief Appraiser of Medina County has delivered and certified the property values within the boundaries of Natalia ISD. This includes the estimated values of properties under protest. The district may not adopt a tax rate until after it receives the certified appraisal roll as required by section 26.01 of the property tax code. The district's tax rate is calculated to assure that enough revenue will be generated in both the general operating fund and the debt service fund to make our bonded debt payments. The debt service fund accounts for the payment of general debt principal and interest for all debt that is issued. The following presentation illustrates our property values and the tax rate breakdown. The Texas Education Code, as amended by the 81st Legislature, requires all school districts to conduct a public meeting to discuss the budget and proposed tax rate that will be adopted for the upcoming school year. Now, this presentation that you see up here on the board is slightly different because I added some notes, but it's not too far off from what you have in your packet. So the district's tax rate is made up of 2 major components. This may be kind of a review, but we're still going to go over it because it is a very good refresher. In the next few slides, we'll be talking about the maintenance and operation portion of the district's tax rate and its breakdown. As you can see here, the M&O tax rate is broken down into 2 tiers. Tier 1 is mainly driven by the property's value growth, and Tier 2 holds the district's what we call enrichment pennies, or also known as gold and copper pennies. We'll go over what those tiers hold as well. And then the second portion of the district's tax rate is the interest, what they call the interest and sinking, and that is determined by property values, state aid, and our bonded debt obligations. Now, just keep in mind as a reminder, these next few slides are only illustrating the maintenance and operations portion of the tax rate. Now, I want to begin with the 18-19 school year because it was the last year before House Bill 3 came along and compressed our tax rate. If you recall, the tax rate compression was brought on by House Bill 3, and it promised to provide taxpayer relief while keeping school districts financially whole. Remember, this is only the M&O portion of the school district. Of the tax rate. Tier 1 is really your base, which is the main portion. Now, some districts have this set a little bit higher, depending on what, or if they had a tax ratification election. Okay, so back in 1819, our base rate was $1, and our Tier 1 rate was $1, and our Tier 2 was 17 cents. And that was made up of 8 copper pennies and 9 golden pennies.
Can you explain for the two relatively newer board members the difference between copper and, kind of what that means?
Okay, the first 9 pennies of the tier 2 M&O tax rate are what they call enrichment pennies. They're both enrichment pennies, but the golden pennies are the ones that yield you the higher dollars. Okay, now depending on whether you have a voter election, you're able to get additional pennies up to an additional 8 pennies. It can be a little bit complicated, but we refer to these as enrichment pennies. So anything above that main tier 1, that base, you're able to get up to 17 pennies. Now, on top of all that, that was back in 1819. This was before House Bill 3. The reason I'm starting here is because that was the first of 2 compressions. And the second compression is the one that we're actually adopting today's rate. So enrichment pennies, you've got 9 golden and 8 copper. Okay? Now, in 1819, the district had the maximum enrichment pennies. So let's just keep that in mind before the first and second compressions came along. So we really had the maximum, everything that we could possibly tax. We had it was approved, we moved it. Okay, so we have already received our property values or our certified property values from our county appraisal district. Now, I do want to say that these are appraised or certified as of July 25th. And these values, they change because of whether it's administrative errors, changes in value is in protests, things, they get accepted, sometimes they don't, values go up, they go down. We're continuously building, we're continuously opening up new subdivisions, commercial properties are coming and going, same with residential. So I just kind of want to make a statement that these values are only certified as of July 25th. And these were the values that I used to calculate our revenues for both the M&O side and the IRS side. Okay, so let's start with a couple more recent years. The Natalia ISD M&O tax rate calculation. So the first tax rate compression was in 1920. Now remember, in tier 1, in 1819 was $1. And then we moved over to 1920, we were compressed down to 93 cents. Now that's not anything that we really had a choice in. That came as a promise from House Bill 3 to provide taxpayers relief while keeping school districts financially whole. So we were compressed from that dollar down to that 93 cents. And then look at what happened to our enrichment pennies. In 1819, we had 17 enrichment pennies, and those by some special formula that I'm not going to get into tonight, we were compressed down to, for simplicity purposes, we were compressed down to 13 cents. So if you guys remember the tax rate that you adopted, the M&O portion of the tax rate that you adopted last year was $1.06. And that included tier 1 and tier 2. So now we're going into 2021. Now this is the second compression of the 2 that was promised by House Bill 3. Now let's look at that tier 1. Notice how that tier 1 is being compressed down to 86 cents. Now that decrease came from the TA gave us a little spreadsheet, and it had a ceiling and it had a floor. Depending on how much your property values grew, you can look at that little chart and you kind of went across the line and you saw, okay, we grew by 10%, so our highest maximum tier 1 tax rate can be this. So we submit our certified values for 1920, and we submit our certified values for 2020, and TEA does that calculation for us. Now, they provide us with the tools ahead of time, so I'm able to see what the tax rate is going to be because I'm the one that reports those values to the state. And they come back and say, yes, we calculated correctly. Your tier 1 is going to be 86 cents. They always, for tax rate purposes, they always go out to the 4th decimal. So I'm not just trying to be smart here. This is actually really what they do. Okay. So our property values grew by 10.15%. The highest our tier 1 tax rate could be was 91 cents. Do you see this little corner? this little corner portion down here, they call that the ceiling for the highest rate. So let's pretend that our values only grew, say 3%. If our values only grew 3%, then our tier 1 tax rate would be closer to 91 cents. Now, let's say that we were a school district close to Austin or Houston or Dallas, one of those fast growth school districts, and let's say our values grew by 20%, or let's just say Comal out in the Longfield area at that 35 corridor. Let's say they grew by 20%. So the floor, or the lowest tax rate that they're going to drop those school districts down is 82 cents. So as you can see, we're somewhere down the middle. We didn't grow as low as 2%, but not as high as 16 or 18%. We were literally right down the middle. So if I look at our 10.15% growth, and I look at my little chart, it tells me if this is what your growth is, then your tier 1 tax rate is at 86 cents right there. Does that make sense? I know it's a lot to take in, but we were basically given a chart, we were given the formula. The main driver of this tier 1 tax rate on the M&O side is the percent of value growth. So that's really the driver there. So that's one of the main reasons why that tier 1 rate went down. Now, I put this little note off to the side here because what we published, what the school district published back in early June, is we published the highest maximum tax rate so that we would not have to be adopting our tax rate twice. So I went out there and I said, okay, community, we're not going to adopt, our tier 1 portion is not going to exceed that 91 cents. And I did the same thing on the debt service side as well. I posted or I published the highest rate possible. Now, had we gotten our property values yet? No, we had not gotten our property values yet. So because that's another one of the, being a July 1 fiscal year, we don't have all the information that we need to be able to publish the exact rate that we're going to adopt. So we keep it on the safe side, and I publish the maximum rate that we could adopt on both the M&L side and the INS side. So that's what that really means. MCR is the maximum compressed rate. So we already knew that that rate was not going to exceed those 91 cents. So now let's move on to tier 2. Now notice we were able to keep all of our 13 pennies. Yes, sir.
Yes, I don't understand
Can you give me the mic?
the,
Andrew, Mr. President, can you hold on just a minute so you can speak into the mic?
Thank you very much. Cool. Okay, the 1920 tier 1 rate is 93 cents. And then we look at the Natalia property value growth is 10.15%. So there was a growth, so it goes down on 2013 instead of going up to 86 cents.
Yes, sir. The compression was brought on by House Bill 3 to provide taxpayer relief. And they were doing that in 2 parts. So the first compression was in 1920, and if you recall from 1819, that tier 1 rate was $1. So it went down to 93 cents, that's tier 1. And then we knew there was going to be a second compression, and that second compression was determined by your property value growth. So if your value grew higher than 2.5%, that rate was going to go down. Regardless, our rate was going to go down from 1920 to 2021. And by how much? It all depended on how much our property values grew. So TEA, the state gave us a chart, and they said, and the growth, it started at 2.5%, and it went all the way down to 16%. And that's that floor and that ceiling right there. So the more that we grew, the less our rate would be. And they did that to provide taxpayer relief. Now, but if we stop and think about it, like more right now, I see where we're going here. They want to provide us property tax relief, but when your values are growing faster, what relief are we really getting? It's nice that they're lowering that tax rate, that's great, and we absolutely appreciate that. But when your values are growing at 15, 16, 17%, yes, they are providing us a little bit of tax relief, but the net or the wash of that is you're still paying more, depending on where you're at. Does that make sense?
Well, it's like I'm reminding some folks with this whole tax thing, because like I said a few meetings ago, people were getting confused between the values and our actual tax rate. Is that this school district has only gone up in taxes 2 out of the last 10 years. One of the times was only by 1 or 2 pennies. Every other year, taxes have gone down aside from the voter passed a bond, which obviously raised the taxes up for 1 year, and since then it's continued to drop. Only, like I said, 2 out of 10 years we've raised taxes. 8 out of 10 years we've dropped taxes. So, but everybody gets confused when they're having to pay more because of the values.
Exactly. Great question. Yes, if those values are growing faster than that rate is dropping, then what benefit are you really seeing? So,
Good answer.
right, yes, if your values are growing faster than the rate is dropping, then we're really not realizing the benefit on our tax bill. So I think what's the answer here? Protest your values, maybe, if you feel like your values are not what they should be, then that's really the source of where I think you're going to realize these things.
What's interesting, our county commissioner for precinct 4, which is the majority of the city of Natalia, in his very candid commentary in the Minor paper last week, reminded everybody that basically he stated that everybody will sleep better at night. Only the reason their values went up was because the chief appraiser, Ms. Dixon, actually got quite a bit of an increase in her paycheck. He actually put her salary in there, showing why your rates are going up. Elected officials just kind of put the truth out there. But that's one reason why every year is kind of a heated deal when each of the taxing entities for Medina County have the opportunity to either approve or not approve the appraisal district budget. Because of situations like that, when the cat actually gets out of the bag on their proposed increases, which in years past, once in a while, it does get out how much of it proposed increases, and when districts and city entities and taxing entities are voted against their proposed budget, they would cut down on their personal increases as an appraisal district. So it's kind of interesting. But obviously, nobody really knew this year that some of the important folks over there were going to get hefty increases up in the first I heard about it already in the paper.
Well, that information is published, and I'm going to put it on our agenda items as well, the budget, accounting. Okay. Are there any other questions?
My only other question would be, and it's not necessarily on this year, but you know what our current, I know we're going to discuss this later, I did not look at it, you know what our current collection rate is?
I budgeted for a collection rate of 95%,
But for this past year,
97.
we're at 97?
Yes, sir. That's the average of the last 3 years. Whenever I budget now, obviously, and I really don't like using this term, but in this unprecedented time, in the past 3 years, our collection rate has been nearing about 97% that I've backed off, just because we don't know, because of the downturn of the economic conditions, we don't know if people are going to be able to pay their taxes, and if they are, so we were told, or we were advised at the state level to back off that collection rate.
And the only other thing I was going to ask you is that, I know you come from a much larger district, so I'm 99% sure they did not do this year, but down here, it seems to have worked in the past. It's not always popular with some of the locals. But at the end of the day, like we tell everybody, only 2 things are guaranteed. Unfortunately, your death and taxes, and we all have to pay them if we own a house. Long story short, 2 weeks ago, Natalia ISD ran the delinquent tax roll in the bond paper. And for many, many years, that was something that we did. We would run a notice for 2 or 3 weeks saying on this such and such date, if you were delinquent on your taxes, we will run your name, your address, and how much you owe. And we did that for like 8 or 10 years, and it would be amazing how much money would come into the school district within those 3 weeks every single time. And that's kind of a small town, it's in the country. Yes, and I mean, Divine does it, Bible does it, we used to do it for years, and like I said, it's not popular. But at the end of the day, what folks gotta realize is the same thing, we don't say value, you have to determine how much you pay on your house, and we all pay taxes, but at the same time, there's things that we have to pay for. And especially now, if, enrollment is a little bit lower and such, it's going to be, it's gonna be a lot tougher for us to make payroll for us to.
That is the biggest
support our
caveat.
kids. I mean, we really need, we have the possibility of taxpayers, that, don't money like the rest of us. Anybody know if that's something you had ever heard of? I wish I could tell by your face, probably not.
I've heard of it, but I don't believe that we did that the district where I came from, but I have heard of that. Just-
Any other questions, guys, at this time? Ms. Vandersloot, Mr. Bessa, Mr. Garza, Mr. Gentry?
I made this a small presentation specifically for this reason, just because I knew, I wanted the discussion to go into a little more depth, if there was absolutely any questions at all.
And at this time, it is a public hearing. If there's anybody from the public that has any questions, comments, concerns on this.
Correct.
If not, this will be an action item later.
We're
on
almost done.
the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we were
Almost
done.
done, we're getting there, we are almost getting there. Okay, so far we've been talking about the M&O side, or the maintenance and operations side. Okay, so now, let's talk about the IMS side, what we call, interest and sinking. And this is what this is the tax rate, this is a completely separate component of the tax rate. Remember, M&O was two parts, tier 1, tier 2. Now, technically, this is really the third part of the tax rate, and it's the IMS tax rate. So I put up here, this is the, I do want to point out a little typo up here. I check my work 3 and 4 and 5 times, and of course, we always something, but that should not say 3.3285, it should say 0.3295. I should double check, I just wanted to make sure you guys are aware of that little typo there. Okay, so our debt service payments. So the INS side of the tax rate is what's used to make our bond payments. Now, right now, and I can say this, and I think I say this in every single board meeting, but Natalia is in a very good financial position. For a district our size, and for our enrollment, and for the revenue that comes in on both the M&O side and the INS side, right now we're only sitting on two, what I like to call mortgage payments, or Series 16, Series 19. We did very recently pay off a Series 13, one of our debt obligations. We paid that off this year in February. So I was very pleased to report that. So this year, now keep in mind, this is not obviously, it's not our total debt, but for the payments that we are obligated to make this year, for Series 16 and Series 19, our principal payment is $484,000, and our interest payment is $370,000. So if you add those two together, we get a total debt service payment of $854,965. Now, that budget was adopted on June 29th. One of the things we do have to consider, though, when setting a tax rate, is we have to back out the state aid that we get. We have to back out IFA is our instructional facilities allotment, and EDA is our existing debt allotment. Now, those two sources of revenue come in, again, through a formula, through our state payments. And one of them, without going into too much detail, one of them is based on ADA, and the other one is based on the age of our facilities. So we are able to get a little bit of help with our existing debt via some state allotments. So if our total payment is $854,000 and we back out our state aid, our total, what's left is $762,000. Now, this is very similar to our debt payment from the prior year, because prior year is when our bond payment, that was the first bond payment started coming on board. So our INS rate for 1920 was 35 cents. Now, because property values increased, we can't keep that rate the same, because that would mean that we would make way more than we needed to make our bond payment. And we are not allowed to set a tax rate that exceeds our bond payments. So if our bond payment is $762, I cannot keep that tax rate at 35 cents. We got to take that down to about 32 cents, and that will yield us just enough revenue to make our bond payments for the school year. Okay? And again, the values, now, for tax rate collection purposes, we do have to rate ourselves at 100%. Now, that is something that our chief appraiser, Ms. Dixon, does calculate on a Form 859, I believe, is the tax rate calculation worksheet, and she does those calculations for us. A couple of board meetings ago, we gave her the authority through a resolution for her to be able to do our calculations. And that's actually a very good recommendation because it kind of gives that third party look in. I'm not the one that's calculating and paying and going through the entire cycle. So it is good that we do have, our chief appraiser is the one who calculates that rate. And really, she's the one who produces this rate here because she knows what our values are. I give her what our debt payments are. I give her what our state aid is. And then she comes back and says, okay, Natalia, this is the rate that you need to make your payments. And then I come back to the drawing board and I run my calculations to make sure, yes, if we pass a 32-cent debt service rate, we have enough to make our debt payments. So that's when two agree, we're going to be okay. Okay? So again, we base it on 100% collection rate. Our values came in at 268 million. So per $100 valuation at $32.95, we should have enough to make that $762,000 payment with those values at that rate. Now, the reason I put the 10% rate increase here is I wanted to illustrate that, again, when those property values grow, we have to bring that rate down. Because if we didn't bring that rate down, then we would be making way more revenue than we need for our debt obligations. And we, by law, we cannot tax our taxpayers any more than we need to make our debt payments. Is that clear? Does that make sense? Okay, so almost done. This is the final slide. So the total tax rate for 1920, over the M&O side, we talked about tier 1, tier 2, it equals $1.06. Again, 1920, $1.06. The INS side was 35 cents. So that $1.42 probably looks familiar to you. That's what y'all adopted in the 1920 school year. Now, 2021, this is what we're looking to adopt tonight. Our maintenance and operations rate is right at $1. And remember, tier 1 was at that 86 cents and some change, and then we kept our enrichment pennies at 13 cents. So the M&O side is at $1, hovering over $1, and then the INS side, we just saw that breakdown at that 32 cents. So the total tax rate for 2021 is $1.3332. So on the M&O side, it's a 6.5% decrease. On the INS side, it's about a 6.6% decrease, and in total, it's about a 6% decrease right there. Okay? And one of the things we also have to illustrate is on a $100,000 home value, last rate's tax rate was $1.42 per $100 of valuation at the prior year rate. The taxes on that property, or the school district portion of the taxes on that property, would be $14.21. And given that same calculation on a $100,000 home with our new tax rate per $100 valuation, the school district's portion of those taxes would be $1,333 for a reduction of about $87 or $88. Okay? We are required to show that comparison so that you're able to see in the most simplistic form. Yes, this new rate that we're adopting really is realizing a decrease. I am more than happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you for your good presentation. Ms. Vanderschleisen, any comments or questions, ma'am? Mr. Bessa, Mr. Garza, Mr. Gibbs. Thank you again. Very good, transparent presentation. I appreciate it. We're going to move on to item number 3, block construction update. Presenter Nate Bell, ACBN, Mr. Jorge Flores, Garza Butler Associates. Come on up, man. Give us some good news and we'll keep it going. President, Dr. Colombo, members of the board, appreciate you guys letting us present this week. I wanted just to run through a couple of things. I think the big thing that you guys are probably all aware of, we do have a general contractor under contract now, and you've always seen the big trailer that started showing up over here on the corner of 8th and Pearson. So that's great news. We have a material testing contractor on board. We got our permits issued on August 3rd. So at this point, we're heavily into the mobilization phase, and things are about to get ready to rock and roll. So that's the big thing that I'm sure you guys are all aware of. All right, just to go over the schedule-wise, we issued notice to proceed. Actually, was issued today to the general contractor. We missed it by a couple days, but it didn't impact anything other than just a line item that would scratch off on the schedule. So the next time that we're actually going to have anything for approval isn't going to be until probably April or May of 2021. So you're just going to get a lot of pictures and a lot of updates on progress and where we're at budget-wise and things like that. Basically moving from this point moving forward, okay? Okay, so as far as budget goes, contract-wise, we're still on track from what we saw last month. The contract for the general contract came in around 9.6 million. Which brings our total construction cost, if you will, to about 9.9 million. That includes the phase 1 MDF relocation. And we've got everything listed out here. I'll report you guys to death, but there is a little bit of wiggle room that we're looking at, and we'll start to look once we get further along in the project process. We'll be looking for savings and things like that. But as of right now, we're keeping our budget pretty much where it was, at about the 11 million range. I apologize, 11.7 million. So, that being said, a couple of highlights that are coming up. We've got abatement that has to happen in a couple of buildings. So the old elementary school has asbestos in the floor, as well as some of the, apologize. No, there's the tile, and then there's the chalkboards. Yes, thank you. I apologize for bringing it. And then we've also got that starting as early as the end of this week. So we've already submitted our 10-day notification to the state, and we're released as far as starting on the 14th. So that being said, we're going to start doing negative air pressure in the old elementary school, as well as where the front admin area is attached to this building, just that front section, not into the 100 wing. So that's scheduled to start end of this week to beginning of next week. As far as the 4-week look ahead, we're looking at site fencing starting to show up starting tomorrow. It will be going through the rest of the week. We will have abatement going from, sorry? Okay. We will have abatement going all the way till around September 10th. And other items on there will be installing the stormwater pollution prevention equipment around the site, and we'll start demolition of some of the asphalt and utility equipment. So that's kind of what we should expect to see leading up until the next quarantine. Okay. Other than that, no major concerns or questions. I will show a site plan, or sorry, an elevation. That we've had a couple meetings about, specifically about colors of the exterior of the building. There has been a little bit of a change of what the lower wainscot of brick it looks like. If you recall some of the original pictures, it was a brick that somewhat resembled limestone. It had a very white chalky color to it. And then above that was a reddish brown colored metal panel. In this one, we have a brick that's called something like autumn. It's a blended brick. It's a little bit darker, and we've got a more beige color panel like Dr. Calavo has up there. So it's a little bit of a change in the color and dynamic of the look. And I guess what we're here today is to make sure there wasn't any concerns with any of those color selections.
I think that looks a lot better.
Good.
Ms. Hammerslas, any thoughts on the look? Bessel? Fernando? Mr. Gentry? My only question is going to be kind of the money elephant in the room, what we've been dealing with, I guess, for the last year, is come time for school. I'm assuming that we're doing kind of the same shut-offs, basically, where this is going to be marked off, this is going to be marked off back here, pretty much the same traffic flow, everything else that we've discussed. Past, or do you-
Yeah, I wasn't involved in all of those meetings, but from what,
Pretty much the same thing?
Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
from what I understand, the front is going to be completely blocked off. The only access point will be between where the administration parks over to the administration building. All other access on 8th Street will be routed either to the high school or around on the other side of the, I don't know the name of that street, but around the other side towards the back entrance, close to like the playgrounds. We will have a
And I guess my only other concern, and same thing is if I'm not on my lane, then correct me, just me thinking, knowing the issues we already have, is every other year, it seems like we change our mind, and this isn't a Nick problem, this is an Italian problem, but we change our mind where we want staff to park for ECC. And so it appears with where y'all set up your trailer, or not you, but y'all, I guess you're kind of the forefront of this body, so I can say y'all, where you set up your trailer, my concern is that our staff is going to once again be forced to park against the ECC and against that fence. And the problem constantly is folks backing out. Now we have, is it one-way or two-way traffic again? And then kids walking, and it's just constantly a safety hazard. And that's why 2 years ago, they did a good job of making sure all the staff parked in the parking lot where you were at, or where the trailer is now. But I'm just worried with so many construction vehicles in and out right in the middle of our thoroughfare. I don't know where there's a good place to park that trailer besides there. But I just feel like we're parking them right in the middle of a very heavily traveled intersection that is full of kids and walkers. And, you know, we're just really adding a ton more of construction workers who are busy trying to get jobs done and maybe aren't. I mean, obviously they do school construction, so they're around people, but I know more, usually it's more of an isolated. This is gonna be isolated for the working, but I'm just worried about the traffic flow we're going to increase over in this area. That's my main concern is for safety. I hate to have our staff park against the building because we've got so many almost, kids walking or people backing up and you can't see if you don't have the backup camera set. And that's just a major concern that I have.
We'll just have to, I guess the other thing is we won't have as many students when we start this year, so we have time to kind of watch the traffic patterns. We can ask construction to go around the block and not come down that street, you know, coming in the direction. I haven't actually seen the parking plan for their, where they're supposed to park, but perhaps we can use some parking over by, the academic services building as well. And then the staff can cross the street right there, because there's quite a bit of parking there. But you come on in.
That's my main concern.
Yeah, I'm liking.
Just, you know, more added traffic to places we've had some tough calls, and almost calls. Ms. Vanderslice, I'm sorry.
I just have a question as to how the staff, because I know, teachers are gonna be coming in, not everyone, but in the next couple of weeks, and instruction will be face-to-face until another 2 weeks after that. But with the construction getting started with asbestos potentially being exposed, is everything safety of, the staff and the children, you know, students coming in 2 weeks, can you explain to us what is being done to protect?
Can you explain that, because it has to do with how they prepare the site, and no one will be in that building.
Yes, correct. So, Ideally, we don't like to do asbestos during the start of school, but that being said, when they set up the rooms in the building for asbestos treatment, what they do is they bring in negative air machines, which basically has a filter, and it makes it so all the air from the outside suck into the building, so we're not releasing outward. Of course, there's going to be barricades and all that kind of stuff that will be in place ahead of time to prevent any kind of travel. Furthermore, we have as a requirement of the state, we are required to have an air quality consultant on board during the abatement process. And that person, basically, they set up air quality monitors throughout the areas that are being treated, and they're required to maintain certain levels by state guidelines.
And there's a construction fence that will be around all of those buildings so that no one will walk up to them. They're not going to have access to those buildings.
Good question. Mr. Bessa, do you have any questions, sir? No? Okay. Anybody else have questions for Mr. Tuttle? And I guess from here on out, we're going to be kind of the face of Wilmington, we hired for pretty much kind of the, I mean, will George be giving any updates, or pretty much you're going to be speaking on behalf of the board?
I will be supporting Jacobo back over here as we move forward. I know that I've been kind of the face, and I'd be happy to do board meetings and things like that, but he's going to be the guy that's on the ground.
And I'm sorry, he is who?
Jacobo, or Jacob, he's with AGCM as well.
Okay.
He's basically our project manager that is boots on the ground, 20 hours a week out here, making sure that things are going according to drawing specs and all that good stuff. Making sure that things happen right. Okay.
Fortunately, we will continue looking at it. I would say the reality like
Can you talk about the whiteboard? Sorry.
you will see me every
Anything else from you two gentlemen? Sounds good. It'll be good to see Dirk when we finally. We're excited. It's really exciting. We'll move on to item number 4, program presentation, federal programs. Mr. Westro.
Good evening, school board members, community, and Dr. Clough. This evening, I'll be going over federal programs and where funding comes from the state. Well, I can get it all the way, but not from just the state. So we have 3 funding sources that Natalia receives. We receive federal money, state money, and local money. So I'm going to break it down on each of the areas and what they provide for Natalia ISD. So of course, we're going to start with federal. That's where we give a large sum of money. So it's appropriated by the federal government by TEA, and it's distributed to the LEA, which is Natalia, and the Service Center. So they receive some monies as well. We use our funds in various specific federal funding sources, and I'll go through those in a little bit. So federal funds is one. And these are the federal programs that Natalia receives. You can see the highlighted areas in yellow. And so these are the areas where we receive money. So Title I is at the elementary and ECC campuses. So we use those funds in those campuses. So we receive Title I Part A and Title I Part C. And for each one of them, there's a funding amount. So there's for improving basic programs. And the second one is education of migratory children. And so with the second one, we share the funds with the Service Center, Region 20, because we only receive a small amount, so we do a shared service agreement with them. The next highlighted one is the Title II Part A, supporting effective instruction. Title III Part A is ELA, which are our English language learners. So we receive funding and we share those funds with Region 20 as well. The next highlighted area is Title IV, Part B, which has been renamed several times, but it's Rural Education Initiative. It used to be called the REAP, it's also rural low income. So for the most part, because we're our rural school district, TEA assigns certain funds for that. We don't receive it every year. We received it one year, we didn't receive it the following year, we received it last year, and we're receiving it again this year. So that's based on numbers within our Natalia ISD school district. The next one is Perkins. So we receive funding for career and technology. We do share with the service center in that area because we share resources with them. So those are the federal programs that we are receiving funding for. So then the next area is going to be the state. So state revenue is appropriated by the state legislation, distributed by TEA based on its weighted instruction arrangements. So this is funding for instructional arrangements, attendance, and average hours per day through instructional setting. And just so you know, this is going through some changes because of COVID. And so there's going to be some changes in stipulations as far as what kind of funding we're receiving there. And again, it varies by specific state funds as well. The next area is state compensatory education. These funds are used to provide supplemental programs and services designed to eliminate any disparity in performance assessments. It's also to close academic gaps, support students who are at risk, and improve dropout rates for economically disadvantaged students. So a large portion is based on how we code our students for at risk, and there's several indicators on how we would rate a student as at risk. And some could be anywhere from teen pregnancy, student who has failed a state assessment, students who have been retained. Those are some of the indicators. There's so many more. But this is what state compensatory education, those are some of the funds we receive for that area. And of course, our local funds, and Ms. Riddle reviewed that. Local revenue is obviously based on local tax dollars. It varies from LEA to LEA. These funds are available for the use in Natalia at our discretion. So that's our local revenue. State special education allotment. These funds are based on State Revenue Foundation program, and it's given to us by the state on the number of special education students, how they're being identified, how they're being serviced, and resources over and above that we provide funding for. So this is the special education allotment. Again, it's based on numbers and how many students are in the program. So with all the funding, we definitely do lots of financial planning. The campuses submit their campus improvement plan with their budget included, and it's tied to the funds that are allocated for campus. So I know one of the questions is, well, how is the money allocated to campuses? So it's based on numbers. So we look at how many students who are in dyslexia at elementary or ECC, how many bilingual students, how many special ed students, and that's how the money is divvied up with the campuses. Goals are written to support the students who are in these at-risk populations, and that's part of the campus improvement plan. So we continue to do financial planning with our teachers, as well as we continue to receive support through the service center. So with federal monies, there is a supplement not supplant rule. This applies to federal funds. Federal funds cannot be used to perform services that would normally be paid for with state and local funds. So one of the examples would be if the district had ordered math books, but we don't have enough to purchase, so we would have to purchase more with federal funds. So we can't do that. If it's a state-funded activity like math books that are a requirement, we can't purchase it with state funds to supplement. we would have to provide it with local funds or with the funds that are available. Providing the same service as those in prior years. So if we purchased the software last year with local funds, we would have to continue to provide it with local funds. We could not use federal monies for the same program. That's not an allowable cost. Providing the same services in federal and non-federal programs. For example, tutorials. If tutorials are offered after school for students, that's paid with federal funds. And then at the high school, we decide to pay it with local funds. That's not allowable. So whatever we do for one campus, we should do it throughout each of the campuses in the district. And there's going to be some changes in stipulations depending on grants and funding. So those are some of the things that we needed to do with that monitor. Again, we do get planning guidance.
Excuse me.
Okay, there is another slide. But we do get plenty of guidance. There is guidance from the state and local agencies. The Service Center also provides training and support. And there is more guidance coming out with COVID and expenditure extensions. So last year they extended some of our deadlines because of COVID, because we were not in school. So they provided extensions for some of the federal programs. But that, in a nutshell, is what federal programs is about. It sounds short and sweet, but it's more extensive than that. Does anybody have questions on federal programs and funding? Yes, sir.
On Title I, Part C, the education of migratory students, who are the teachers in that? Do you know? Who's teaching that?
The Title I?
Title
Migrant
yes.
students.
Oh, so let me tell you about migrant. We work with Region 20, and so they come out, they help identify students. So in the past, Natalia has had up to 15 students who are considered migrant. So we have staff who are local, and we were looking at some of the numbers of students who have been labeled migrant, and a lot of the students were mislabeled. And so I've talked to the Service Center. We have about now 5 students who are migrant students. The migrant students are in general education classes, and the teachers are supporting their needs. So if they need extra assistance or supplemental aids or supports, then the general ed teacher provides those training pieces.
Who the regular teachers?
So there is not a migrant teacher, so to say. All the students are not segregated, they're in a general classroom, and so the supports are being provided by the general education teachers. Yeah. Good question.
And the parents are aware of this.
Yes, okay, so with registration, parents fill out a survey, and they have to fill out whether or not they're migrant or not, and when they have questions about it, then we help and assist with that. So a migrant parent is still somebody who departs for a majority of the week to work somewhere else. And a lot of times it's, they're pulling, cotton, vegetation, fish dispensaries, there's different ways to identify students who are migrant. But the parents are the ones who self-identify.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Vandersloot.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What resources within the school do you have available at your disposal to appropriately code the students at each campus to ensure that the school receives the necessary funds to serve the students? The resources to code, it's so important to be able to identify. You mentioned a little bit about that.
Okay.
Can you expand?
Yes. So, in the past, I can tell you where we were, where we are now. Coding was very difficult for each of the campuses. At this time, on each of the campuses, the counselors are coding. So if a student is in bilingual special education, they're usually the ones who have the meetings. So at ECC and elementary, the LPAC representative is the vice principal. So she informs the counselor of the meeting, the changes, and then we would code the student for that program. For 504, we would do the same. For dyslexia, we would do the same. For special education, because it is meticulous, my staff does the coding for special education. Dyslexia is done by the counselor as well, because they're usually in a 504 meeting, and the counselors are the ones who hold those 504 meetings. So the counselor is the one who is coding the students. And so they receive training through our PACE coordinator, who also goes through sense training. So we have really tightened that up because we have noticed that there was a large discrepancy in how many at-risk kiddos we have to the amount of students that are being retested for the second and third time. So these students should be identified as at-risk. And that's something that we're continuing to work with our staff with. So we are continuing with training.
So each campus has, like you said, the counselor or a designated person. Is there a person within the whole district that gets to look at the congregated data?
Yes, that falls under my area too. So, we have a PMS coordinator, and so she has Region 20 liaison, so they come once a month to visit. We provide training for all the staff members, so they're aware that once a month she comes if there's any burning questions on coding, pretty much anything with PMS, she's our go-to person. So
I'm gonna make a comment as well.
Yes, ma'am.
On the money's appropriated, especially Title I, by our economically disadvantaged population, which is determined by the free and reduced lunch population, which actually comes from the cafeteria. And, so it's like she's saying, we have all those codes, and then we also have the at-risk criteria that does come in from the counselors. And PEAS is actually an acronym for Public Education Information Management System. So that's where it all is, and once it's in there, it's actually accessible at the state level as well. I mean, it is,
Open record.
well, no, it's not open record. The student categories are not necessarily open record, but it is, like, that's how they, I'm sorry?
Percentage.
It's, the state can access that information. Like when we get our state tests in, they're already coded. You know,
we used to receive a report card, and I think that's what you might be thinking of. So PEAMS reports student information, but it doesn't give students per se the name and
That's not
identity.
demographic data.
Right, just demographic.
And one more question I have, are there any constraints or, since enrollment for this school year, from what I believe, there are other neighboring districts that may be open to receive some students that belong to Natalia ISD? So do we have any concerns of enrollment for this school year that may decrease funds?
I really don't have an answer just yet. I do know that we've had several transfers. So for special programs, I've been receiving over special transfers. So we've had several students from Divine and from Lidle coming into Natalia as transfer students. So I know we're receiving them.
We have some that are.
I can speak for special education. Usually the request comes through me and then I send out the records. So we don't have a lot of students, but we don't have the numbers exactly right now.
And I think we may go over during the back to school report, where we talk about attendance enrollment, that type of thing also.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Garza, any questions? Mr. Gentry? Does that conclude yours, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're gonna move on to item number 5, progress monitoring, the GPM 1.2, GPM 2.2, superintendent constraint progress measure, and board constraint 2.0. Ms. Robinson, go ahead.
I asked Ms. Robinson to do this. This is actually a review of data, but it's keeping us on track with the student outcome progress.
Good evening, Mr. President, Board Trustees, Dr. Colado, executive staff, and guests. I'm going to share with you the latest data that we have, which was from the middle of the school year in 2019-2020. And I will say that we all look forward to getting more data that will help us make better plans moving forward. So, and that will be shortly after school starts. So we will have a new round of data soon. But tonight, talking about our student outcome goals 1.0 and 2.0, and then our GPMs 1.2 and 2.2. We'll talk a little bit. Sorry. We'll talk a little bit about what specifically about those two student outcome goals, where we saw improvement in the last school year. So this is the data and the progress measure, or this cutoff point that you guys have set last year. I remember we were reaching for, at the end of the school year, 46% of our third grade students at our level college and career readiness level, which is the MEETS level and STAR. And we wanted to increase that from a 28 to 51%. Just a reminder that the MEETS level and STAR is not the lowest level where the kid is still passing. So I just want to remind us all of that. We're going to look specifically at 1.2, which is looking at our lifestyle levels, and lifestyles are the way that categorizes the level where the students are at within their reading abilities. So we were looking at specifically their lifestyle levels and what correlates to the MEETS level on the STAR test. Now, I will remind you that this data was taken at middle of the year and also holding them to the end of year standard. So it was given in December, but compared against the end of year lifestyle level. So just keep that in mind. When we look at our GPM 1.2 specifically, our goal is to get 38 out of 75 students to the goal at the end of the 2019-20 school year. And at middle of the year, we were at 14 out of 75. And so we were making progress. Again, remember that's the end of year goal. And we were already at, in December, January timeframe, we were at a 14 out of 75. That means. Any questions about that one? What are reading? I'm going to show you just a little bit of supporting data. I'm not going to go through it extensively, but we give many we have many points of data that we use to diagnose. There's a difference in assessment types, and in this specific assessment type, it's more diagnostic. So it'll tell you where their level is, not against a certain grade level, but where they are on a continuum or a normed test. So when we look at the DRA, which is diagnostic reading assessment, which our kinder through 5th grade students take 3 times a year, this was the breakdown at the middle of the school year. So comparatively, looking from the 18-19 school year to the 19-20 school year, we were making progress. That's not shown on this slide, but that was part of the presentation prior to. Another source of supporting data, which we will continue for the 2020 and 2021 school year, is our Reading Plus program that talks to us about silent reading fluency gains, and also our reading level gains within the school year. We had seen lots of progress on the number of reading lessons that were passed and the increase in their reading levels throughout the school year compared to the beginning of the school year. Any questions on 1.2 before we move to 2.2? So we'll look at 2.0. Remember, this is the student outcome goal that is centered around 7th grade math. Our new goal, which will be set in January, I believe, right? This is what we have heard, that we'll set the goals about January timeframe. Will be reflective of the House Bill 3 3rd grade level, but I'm just brushing us up on where we were the last round of data. And we had set to our goal to increase from 33% to 53% by 2024. And at the end of the 18-19 school year, we ended at that first level, I'm sorry, that's the 33% at the end of the 18-19 school year. Again, this is the MEETS level on STAR, which is that middle level, not the lowest level that kids can get to without, and still pass. So to reach our goal, we would have had to have 33 out of 75 students at the end of the school year, at the 19-20 school year. And specifically looking at GPM, our goal progress monitoring of 2.2, which refers to the quantile levels. Quantiles are like lifestyles except for math, and quantiles will give you a norm level of where a student is at in mathematics. So looking specifically at the quantile levels, We needed to get to 33 out of 75, and again, in December, January timeframe, we were at 3 out of 75. And I want us to remember that, and that's why that asterisk is there, that's the end of your goal. And so it is highly unlikely in mathematics that you'll reach the end of your goal months within a school year. Because in mathematics, if you're not taught the concept, you're not going to pass that concept. And again, it was measuring their academics level, which, that also is something to consider as well looking at this data. When we looked at other measures of this data back when we took those middle of year tests, we looked at their algebraic readiness, we looked at, and that was last month's presentation, we looked at their numeracy, their representations of numbers or mathematics in general, and we felt like they were making adequate progress. Again, this will show the number of kids who are already at the end of year in December. So that's why that number was so. I've left that superintendent slide in there. But that was from the old presentation. But the GPM, to measure this data, we use a couple of different things. We use math inventory, which is for our younger kids, K through 2. And then we use Imagine Math on 3rd through 8th graders. And Imagine Math, I've heard a lot about, but this is just a little breakdown of the kids who are at approaches, meets, or does not meet. Again, at that end of your goal at the middle of the year. So the yellow boxes that you see kind of highlighted towards the top are kids who are within 1 to 2 points of reaching that approaches level. So already at the middle of the year, we could have added 8 more to that 8th grade bar, yellow bar, so on and so forth. So we're making good movement and momentum towards that goal at that time, which makes me really sad that our school year just abruptly stopped. Any questions or comments or thoughts? I will share that I think we've looked at this slide before, but I just want to remind you that the research says that it's going to be devastating. That's the word they use. I think it's an opportunity for us to make great gains where they haven't been learning much since March. Like they would have been in actual school. So what we have to keep a close eye on is, finding those gaps. So our in-service coming up next week is going to be working with our teachers to do just that, finding out where our students' gaps are. And then talking about how to fill them in, scaffolding the learning to where, just like a scaffolding works on the outside of a building or used to paint, using a scaffold to paint, it's essentially that. Scaffolding in education means that we're going to try to pull them up to that height and give them that same support so that we can get them back to where they need to be. One of the things that I've read recently was, mother was very worried about my child's going to fall behind, and then the question was, fall behind who? Like, who are you going to fall behind? Everybody's in the same situation, right? So, but it gives Natalia the opportunity to pull back ahead. Everybody else around us, because we are doing great things here. So, but we do know COVID-19 is definitely going to set us back a little bit. We're going to have to teach about 4 to 5 months of standards before we can actually teach our current grade level standards. So,
Reminder, we do have the remote learning plan and notice of parents, which we can talk more about the school year. If you have any questions specifically on whole progress monitoring 1.2 or 2.2 at this time, can we draw some? Ms. Ball, Ms. Kamala.
Can I,
Go ahead.
sorry, can I finish the last few slides?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I keep on cutting people off.
I just want to let you know that we do have new sources of data coming very soon. So hopefully by our September board meeting, we'll have that be around. I want to show you just a list of things that we're adding in the next slide for our teachers and our students in order to fill in the gaps with learning. We've purchased 2 very solid learning management systems. Schoology and Seesaw used at separate grade levels. Schoology is 2nd through 12th, and Seesaw is pre-K through 1st. And those will manage our learning. We have added a slew of programs that will help our teachers pull content that is aligned to our standards, so they'll spend less time creating content and more time worrying about the instructional model that's so totally different right now. So we've added quite a bit since our teachers and students have been gone.
I guess a quick question on that. And I know it's something you have to do or you wouldn't be doing, obviously, is adding more, I guess, programs for staff. And obviously the intent, what you just said, is to, in the long run, make it easier for them, not add stress. How hard do you think that's going to be, I guess, introducing new material is, I guess, everything's different now, but you know what I'm saying, adding more, I guess, having to vary their scope and their focus.
It's kind of like when my husband goes to Home Depot and buys a whole bunch of tools and his toolbox is overflowing. That's what a little bit what's going to be like. But I will say that our staff and our administrators are definitely capable, because what we've been through the last 3 years was just as difficult as what we're going to have to go through in the next 3 months. So, turning around a system, it was difficult. We put our heads down, we got working, and every single year or month along the way, we were thinking, how much more could we put on them, right? So we were very much considering them. So I feel like these will be, yes, there's a lot of tools that we've added to our toolbox, and sometimes it's confusing, but these are tools that are going to help alleviate their stress. And so they're no longer having to create solid content as much as organizing solid content and focusing on building the relationships with the children who obviously will be far disconnected from the school than previous years. So I feel like it's a good addition.
And I want to make a comment about the learning management system. We all know that our instruction from March to May was not what we can continue. We needed to beef up the situation, and we spent a lot of time actually studying learning management systems, and we picked, as a group, the administrators whenever we use Schoology, which is a learning management system that a number of districts are using. And then the state began to look at learning management systems, and they selected a learning management system that they would fund for the entire state, and they picked Schoology. So it's actually saving us about $12,000 that we had budgeted to pay for Schoology. The state of Texas is going to pay for it for the next 2 years. So which freed us up some money by something else to help support.
I will brag on this one more time. Thank you for bragging on us, because we did pick a good system, and then the state was like, yeah, that's what Natalia is doing. Let's do that.
That's right.
Amplify was another thing that we purchased before the state had, or we had adopted before. We hadn't purchased it yet, but we were looking into that, and the state chose that company for their screeners for K2, K3 actually, dyslexia screeners and diagnostic reading screeners. We had already chosen that, felt like it was very well aligned. And so it just is those little affirmations that we actually do know what we're doing, right? No, but to know that we put the effort in and we see the greatness. So I just want to brag on this again.
And just curious, I mean, obviously, I'm well aware that I'm sure administratively, they all obviously discuss all of that, that's very evident. I know we all meet all the time on Zoom and everything else. Has some of this already been kind of virtually distributed to the staff to where they're watching some training videos, this and that, and the other? Is this something they're hearing about for the first time tonight?
Okay, yes and no. I will say that when I was telling the construction manager, one of the hardest things for us right now is the backlog on everything digital, everything. Even our non-digital stuff is, it's supposed to be shipped and received right now, it's not. So that's delaying us a lot. But as soon as we're getting it, we're processing it between Jeanette, myself, principals, anybody really who can get in there and get it done. Our teachers have just received their Schoology logins, which is learning management system, and they've been enrolled in a course. So we have some innovators that have done that already and started the course, but by March, Monday will be their first experience.
And I'm going to ask one question that may slightly be online. I'm going to put a few people on the spot, including you, Dr. Clavo, Ms. Riddle, and Ms. Roberts. But with that said, the world is turning to technology, as we know. I know we're operating historically in Natalia probably in body less than we have in the past, over the past 10 years. obviously, we've already approved our budget, I understand that. Do we have enough help in our technology department to fully function, or are we going to force the hand of retirement because overwork and underhelped? And kind of like I've used in the past with maintenance, is you can expect a rollout of 4 people, but at the end of the day, they can only do what 4 people can do. Or is any other district adding staff in that area to make sure we're getting everything we can get out of that department? Because it just seems like a ton now with a new school being built, and just so many things that are having to be done. I'm just wondering, are we, and like I said, I know it's kind of the cart after the horse per se, but are we fully functional in that department enough, or are we really shortchanging ourselves because of the fear of anybody wanting to ask for help?
I just want to say, I'll say one thing, but I think Dr. Palmer should answer that question. But there is a section where Jeanette's department and my department overlap, and that's called what we call instructional technology. We do not have any instructional technologists in our district, and that's usually something bigger districts have, but I've seen smaller districts have them too.
I'll recommend these ladies, they have done what they need to do, but if they got offered help, they would take it. If we had that opportunity, but they work all the time, and they work together, they work hard to get the technology going, and when Jeanette is resting, she works on the website. So, they're working a lot, and whether or not we're very reluctant to do anything with staff other than not hire if we have an opening, because we're short students. And we know that if we don't have students, we don't have funds. So, if we could, yes.
And the reason I'm asking is because I know, and I mean, just the numbers you shared with me earlier on the side, which we'll get to in a minute, obviously that was quite scary. But, you know, I guess my only concern, like I said, at the end of the day, this is y'all's department. It's just, I know at the end of the day, that technology, it seems like is going to be, you know, a lot more of a battle for the immediate and possibly extended future. And, you know, like I said, I just don't know how far to stretch. We can stretch a few, and, you know, that's not coming from anybody except my own outward looking inward without knowing all the facts, obviously. It's just like anything else, you know, I mean, we added a maintenance person, because it was needed, but I mean, you know, I know there's many other needs that aren't being possibly, or maybe other people are being stretched within other departments. I know everybody goes up and gets the job done and doesn't complain about it. It's just a question I thought maybe needed to be asked, maybe it didn't. I've been asked her on the side, obviously.
That's all right.
This kind of came up,
It's not one that we can actually commit to right now, or I would
Correct.
recommend it,
No, I
just
understand.
because we don't have, I'll just talk through enrollment right now, just real quickly. We currently are short over 100 students at elementary. And the junior high only has 81 students who have enrolled. And the high school is nearly full. They're close. They're short, maybe 40 or 50. But for every 100 students that we don't have, that's over $1 million that we don't get. That's about the estimate.
Do you want to talk about enrollment now or later?
And we can talk about, what did you,
Well,
I
I mean, I was
guess
just
let's
gonna
finish this one report and then we'll go into them, and then we'll talk about
Any
it.
other questions on the goal progress monitoring?
We have the superintendent constraints
Right.
that I can just address.
Go ahead.
Do not allow inequitable financial support for Natalia ISD student outcome goals. And it's remained the same, so that has not changed. And then we have the goal progress monitoring the board of constraint to review as well, which is do not either collectively or through the actions of individual members undermine or appear to perform any of the duties, responsibilities of the superintendent or the administration.
Yes, sir. And on the goal progress monitoring for the board constraint that she just read, Mr. Garza, have you done so, sir?
No.
Mr. Bessa? Ms. Vanderslice? Mr. Ginger? Myself?
Okay, then before she goes into, she is going to go into the instructional plan and review that. That's another thing that's been worked on almost constantly for the last 3 months. I even just did an estimate. I'm listening to the commissioner somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 hours in the last 4 months. It's often that we hear the commissioner, and now we're down to once a week, which I'm looking forward to. And each time there's something new, there's something different, there's an addition, there's a change. So we have been in and out of procedures and things that we were going to do, and continue to just keep working on the plan, adding to it, changing it, and I'm going to let Ms. Robinson go over that. But in the midst of that, we do have to have students. We have to have them enrolled either for remote learning or for on-campus learning. And we're doing call out, we have the campuses calling, we've had on-campus registration, we've had online registration, we can still register online. In order to receive a Chromebook, a student needs to enroll. We have to have them present. And actually, even after you fill out the paperwork, a student won't be enrolled, quote unquote, until they sit in a seat or open their computer and interact with us for the first time in instruction. That will make them an actual student for the 2021 school year. So that is an extremely important thing. The good news for us is we do have some time to get everybody back in, because the state has its own requirements for attendance for the first 12 weeks of school. So it will revert back to last year in our form of funding, but after that, we're on our own. So we do have to get the students back in school and going. And what I worry the most about, I've said it several times to people, is that it's very important to have a connection to the school. It's something that you feel loyal to your school, but I fear that because we've been away for a while, that some of those connections are lagging somewhat, and it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind, and I want to get that built back in them. And it's important, I think, for people to continue to be loyal to Natalia ISD and love their school and their friends, and we have to, that's a side effect of COVID that we're really working with, so it's tough. So you can explain what we're doing, because we're getting ready to start, and may change it as we go.
Can I ask a question on the enrollment percent?
Yes.
Do we know how far down we are percentage-wise compared to maybe a year ago at this time?
Not exactly, that we don't really keep that information, but I know the junior high had more than that. Now, it is common for students to show up on the first day without ever having enrolled in a normal situation, and you give them the paperwork and bring it back.
And our normal junior high enrollment is somewhere just over 200, correct? Around 220, 230.
250, 245, something
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
about 245, that's in the Chromebooks they ordered, that's what they're.
What does Dr. Camacho feel maybe does he know? I mean, is he heard?
No, they just call and remind, and, oh, okay, and, we are doing everything we can, trying to.
The only other thing I was thinking, and I don't know, I'm sure y'all thought out of the box too, is we thought about maybe kind of like we did lunch distribution, or maybe we go set up for 3 or 4 hours out at the fire station, Forest Woods and Gray Hills, try to go to them. I don't know if that would help at all. I'm just thinking.
We're hoping they just show up too, because that is typical, when a large group just comes to school for the day starts.
Ms. Vanderslice, if you can get the microphone, please.
Okay, so I have a question. What is the last day to register?
We register whenever.
Okay.
Whenever. We don't have any more, or we have it in face-to-face, but you can still register online, and we take registration when they want to.
And is the school in a position or administration to make phone calls to parents?
Yeah, they're making phone calls. They are doing
making
that.
phone calls to just touch base with parents and just.
They're doing that. They sure are.
Mr. Bessa, do you have any questions? No, sir. Mr. Garza? Mr. Jason? You can continue now, thank you.
So I will start by saying that this is not the plan that we will, the formalized plan that we will be submitting to the state. It's just the highlights of that plan that we felt were most important to communicate with our community right off the bat, right? So we're still in formulation of
I just remembered one thing. For the enrollment in the junior high, one of the issues is the immunizations. They must have the immunization to enroll whether they are in school, on campus, or remote, and there's an immunization in seventh grade that a lot of them are missing. So So it is an immunization issue. Sorry.
Have we, just asking again, just thinking out loud, I know a lot of doctor's offices keep changing their rules, protocols, and whether you can come in or you can't. Have we given out some resources or maybe local clinics that are offering this, that we relate to the staff or to parents possibly? Like you can go to these doctors in Divine and these doctors in Lytle or this doctor in Castroville.
I just heard it today. That's how I don't know. It was a meeting today, and it just came to mind that it is immunizations that are an issue with junior high, so that would be the next step.
Thank you.
So, in our formalized plan, we will have a lot more information that's more specific to the educational processes that this is going to share with the community. And we just wanted to give some highlights. First of all, our academic calendar has not changed. It's changed multiple times, but not changed like the commissioner first was suggesting, but we'll start early. And they came back and said, no, you may want to start later. But we decided to keep it essentially the same. It did change to 180 days, just as a reminder that we increased the number of instructional days for our students. We thought that was best for them. And then we're allowing this transition time frame. And I'm sure y'all seen this piece before where we are going to have to use completely remote. And by the end of that first week, August 28th, our parents who have chosen either remote or on campus can make their last change up to that day of what they want, either remote or on campus. That's not the last day to register. That's the last day to make the decision to be either remote or on campus. And then when we get to that third week, the Labor Day week, we will have approximately, it says 50% week, but if it is to where we can fit all, most of the kids here, then we can fit most of the kids here. We're going to utilize that time frame to practice procedures, to ensure that we have health and safety present in everything we do. And then also, I forgot to mention the first 2 weeks, we're going to practice digital orientation, how kids log in, how they participate, when they should log in, how they should act when they're logging, things like that. And then also help our teachers to be able to orient themselves to the programs that we have. So we're calling it a 4-week transition period because at the 4th week, we will be having 100% of the students who want to come on campus. So at that time, we will be able to have our procedures down with that first group of students and be in a better working kind of model with that. So this transition allows us time to perfect the things that we know. I don't know if perfect is the best word to use. I don't know if anybody can do that in a situation like this, but to better practice, to make sure that we have things in the right place and procedures in the right place where they're needed. We've already talked about remote or on-campus learning. I want to just say that if anybody ever asks you why the water says, I don't want my child on a device 8 hours a day, especially if they're younger parents, I want to just empower you to say they won't be, because that is not the kind of learning that we want our little kids to do, especially at the younger grade levels. We don't want them staring at a screen 8 hours a day. It'll be mainly asynchronous type activities with some, and asynchronous means let's go do this fun activity without being face-to-face with, or, on a digital device with the teacher. And then there will be some synchronous opportunities for every grade level to have, like, a meet the teacher, or let's talk about it, let's have a reading circle, let's read aloud, or math lessons, things like that. But it's not going to be staring at a screen for 8 hours a day. And that's something that I think parents, envision, and I don't blame them. That's something that, that they would actually envision their students doing. So whether they're on campus or remote, we're working hard on engagement strategies. We started that last school year, and we're going to continue with it this school year. So just as if we're continuing that while just in a different model of teaching. So we will have distractions for the students. They can choose at any time. I will say that our remote learning and assignments are going to be due when the teacher says they're due. And our March through May, we said as long as you finish them by Friday for the whole week, then you could be counted as
present during that learning time. That was a crisis response, and that was pretty much what every other district was doing. However, this time, if they are signed on Monday and they're due on Monday, then they're gonna be due on Monday. And if they don't turn them in on Monday, then it'll be recorded as an absence. And so whenever that due date is for the teacher, for that teacher's assignments, if they're not completed, then they will receive an absence. We are going to really focus on the difference between synchronous and asynchronous and what that could look like at a different grade level. Each grade level may look different, but here's a sample schedule of what fifth grade students' day would look like, whatever grade level of the lower grade level. So there could be a synchronous morning message, meaning everybody log in, let's hear a message from the teacher, the principal, whatever that is, announcements, whatever that is. And then they could be a synchronous lesson for reading, and then have activities in social studies and art that are away from their device, so that they can have that, creative time or that work time away from staring at that device. And so you can see here that color coding. The blue would mean that maybe they're together with their teacher, and the green meaning that they would be independent. This is just a sample. This obviously would be something for an older student, because there's lots of those synchronous times. So the younger they get, the more asynchronous activities would exist. So I'm going to pause right there. Any questions? So for an older student, there will probably be synchronous times for almost every class period they're in. So junior high and high school, by the way, high school, is that credit-bearing course, and they have to take attendance in every period. So we want to make sure that they graduate and they're successful in their high school courses. And junior high is intended to be a similar model. So we are going to have mostly synchronous days for our older kiddos, where they will log in. Now, they may not have to be logged in the entire class period. So if the class period is 45 minutes, the teacher may teach the lesson in 20 minutes, and then the remainder 25 minutes will be activity-based or small groups, helping students individually, things like that. So the natural question is, if you've ever seen a classroom or known a teacher or been a teacher, you probably think, how are we going to pull this off with kids there, kids here, figuring out everybody's needs? There are a few devices that we purchase for our teachers. First of all, I want to say that every student will be issued a district device. It is going to be issued to them, and expect them to use it, because our wonderful technology department is all the time figuring out how to troubleshoot things, and we will not support non-district devices. That would be way too overwhelming. And also will help us to minimize the exposure to outside distractions or evils of the internet, things like that. So we have worked together to figure out the lockdown of what exactly we want when they open up a Chromebook or they turn on the tablet. Where's it taking them, and where do we need to lock it down? So our young kids will have a little 8-inch tablet that they can't go anywhere besides the apps that we've chosen for them. They can't go out to the internet, they can't go out, so it locks it down. It also has a blue light filter on it, which means it takes out the blue light of the screen to protect their eyes. It won't let them use it while charging, things like that we would want to happen for any kid. So all kids will have devices. All of our teachers will have devices as well, but also we're buying them robots that follow them around their classroom, and they really do. These robots hold a tablet, and the teachers wear a trace, a marker. They call it a marker, a tracer or something, and it's a microphone as well as something that helps the robot turn wherever that teacher turns. So I've used it a lot in my professional developments or in my coaching of teachers, like they'll record their lessons and we'll watch them together. And so we've already owned some of these in our district before, so we went ahead and purchased one for at every classroom. and every teacher to use. That really will help me, so if I'm walking around, or if I'm up at my board, or if I walk to the back and point to a poster on it, whatever it is, that camera is following me, so the kids at home will be able to see me as well, and hear me, so that if I'm not, if I'm 20 feet away from the microphone, they're not gonna be able to hear me, but this tracer has a mic in it as well. It's crazy, to think how far technology's come, but my last classroom had chalkboard and chalk. So, we are going to be taking attendance based on our, local policy for attendance and legal policy for attendance. We also are going to be following our normal grading guidelines that we followed just like any other school year. Our special programs, our students in special programs, will receive the same services that they received in a normal school year. And we are going to allow transition from on-campus to remote at any time. So if a student on campus feels unsafe, or a family has somebody diagnosed in the household, or the student sick, they can transfer from on-campus to remote at any time. They cannot transfer from remote to on-campus at any time. They have to wait till the grading period. So that will help us to be able to plan and prepare for new students coming in at that time. We will be providing areas if one particular classroom is over capacity. We're going to provide a virtual hub, which would essentially be like a cafeteria. If let's say, Ms. T's classroom has 20 kids that class period, but her classroom can only facilitate about 10, then the rest of them can come here and run remotely for that class period. And then we'll switch back and forth on the days to make sure that they get that face-to-face as well. The rest are about the transportation guidelines and how we'll treat that transportation. We are going to make sure that we follow some of that. If you wanted to speak to the transportation.
In the next section.
Okay.
So I have the.
You have a piece on that? We are going to ask that the families sit together. We're going to space the cars we can. We're going to use the hand sanitizer, things like that. We will be cleaning and sanitizing all of our areas that kids have been in, faculty have been in, things like that. And so we will make sure that everything's wiped down, clean, like the guidelines have suggested for us. Food and nutrition, we will be having food in the cafeterias in a socially distanced way. So we will be, smaller groups of kids coming in. And right now, the kids who have chosen to come on campus is far smaller than that will allow us to distance them. So we just talked a little bit about the health screenings. We will, require our teachers, when they sign in for the day, to answer if they have any symptoms, making sure that they have an attestation daily when they log in, and our students will be screened in the same manner. So we'll make sure that they're asking some kind of questions to make sure that they don't enter the building. And then we are going to be required to have locations in our buildings that will remove any students with symptoms and hold them in a safe place until somebody can come up. So we've already talked about extracurricular activities. They are going to be able to participate in extracurricular activities regardless of choosing on campus or remote.
The practice is on campus.
And we will, and they need to have their own transportation to those practices and things like that. There are a lot of things that our plan that we are going to have to submit to the state require that aren't in this plan. This was intended for families and community and teachers. So that plan is due October 1st, and it's a lot more extensive than just what we have.
So are we ready? No. But, is it gonna happen? Oh, I'm sorry. I said, do we feel like we're 100% ready? Probably not, but, we're moving forward.
Yes, and ready or not, right? Ready or not, it's gonna happen, and we're gonna make sure, just like in previous years, that we do things that are best for our kids and for our staff.
And I've been asked this question by board members and administrators of all other districts. I mean, to the best of our knowledge, everybody who's on contract is intending to return to teach. I mean, I haven't heard of any other, obviously, we've had a few new hires come in, supposedly for some non-COVID reasons. But as far as y'all are under the understanding, we're not going to get those issues at this time, correct? Is that your knowledge? Okay. Did you have more part?
I just have a draft Natalia ISD notice to parents. We do have to send out a notice to parents that talks about our practices, our mitigation, and that you have it there, and I can go through it a little bit. We have to do a COVID contact at each campus, that's the principals. It reiterates the attendance rule, remote students and on-campus students have the same attendance rules and the same grading rules. They have to have 90% attendance and they have to complete their assignments, so they have the same rules. It lists the practices to prevent the virus from entering and the screening, all of this almost, except for a few things we've added, is from the Texas Education Agency. It's their recommendations. It lists in there that the staff will screen themselves and then they will actually, when they check in for the day, have to say, yes, I'm fine. So they'll have to attest to that. Student screening, parents are to ensure that their students are not sick when they send them to school, and at the end of this is a sheet for the parents to keep at home. On the other hand, we will do some screening. The county is providing a lot of things to area schools, and I talked to the judge, he called Judge Schumark, and then we worked with the secretary, and we are getting, let me see if I can get it, we are getting, supposed to get 100 infrared thermometers, so each teacher can have one. If someone's sick during the day, they can very discreetly, because we have to maintain confidentiality of the student at all times, very discreetly can check before she contacts a nurse. They're looking at even the screeners, Ms. Vandersloot's talking about it, like the screeners that you walk by, to check, but we will also, when we use those where students walk by and it takes their temperatures, they walk by, we have to keep that information confidential as well. So we will, we have not gotten those things yet, but they are in the process of being ordered. The county is also looking at the directional signs for us that are Natalia ISD specific that say 6 feet, one way, all those things, wear a mask. Those types of signs and dividers for the teacher, plexiglass for the teacher's desk and the secretary's desk. I think that's it. It's like thousands of dollars. So that will help us in our mitigation, in our screenings. Visitors will be screened. We're actually limiting visitors. Visitors will not be in classroom areas at this time. There are a few visitors that will come, though sometimes you get one from CPS or whatever, and we will go through our Raptor system to do that screening. The criteria for reentry is listed. This is from Texas Education Agency. If the Texas Education Agency changes their criteria, we'll have to change this. And it tells in here exactly what we're going to do as far as a lab confirmed case of anybody. The things we'll do in the classroom, I don't want to read them all, it'll just go on forever. But all those things are listed. Our instructional practices will space desks, students will be facing the teacher, we'll avoid group activities, limit movement, we'll use outdoor spaces as appropriate, and we won't have soft items in the room because we're going to be using foggers to sanitize. There's the food service list, the transportation list. So we will send this home I believe we're planning to send it home in the packet with when we do the Chromebook distribution, the device distribution, they'll get a packet and have this in it and a lot of their information that they'll need. So that is actually next week. So I have one more person to report and that's it. Any questions about all that? I'll be happy to answer, but it's pretty in there.
Mr. Bessa?
No.
Oh, I thought we were in there. Ms. Vandersloot?
During the spring, there were tutors available for parents who work with their students in the evenings. Since starting the school year, some of the parents are going to choose asynchronous instruction for their students. Will there be tutors available for parents?
They still are deemed our avid ambassadors, however, I think both of them have jobs now. So, we'll have to go back out for that. And honestly, I don't know what the answer to that question is, because currently, right now, we're working on initial instruction, ensuring that we can get this up and going. And that is something, just know that that's something that we have thought about, and we are saying, okay, yes, we'll come back to
Because parents would want to communicate with the teacher via email, the teacher may not be available in the evenings.
We are gonna have to, you're right, we are gonna have to set a precedence for everybody to understand our teachers have a schedule, everybody, right? And so, and I know our teachers are awesome and they want to help at any time.
And then another question, and it kind of goes with IT. I know also parents who had problems with devices, will there be resources available from IT? If the parent has problems with the device or the connection, again, if they're choosing asynchronous instruction, they're working in the evenings with their children.
We have 3 different services. We have AT&T hotspots, we have Verizon hotspots, we have T-Mobile hotspots, and hope one of them works. Wherever they are, we'll try all 3 to get that service if they don't have their own internet.
But, I mean,
And it's not part of it when we contact the school. If they have-
There's an email situation, there is a help desk for home.
If, I think the question is if they have an issue at 7 o'clock at night, can they find somebody at 7 o'clock at night? Is that what you're asking? Probably.
I mean,
They'll have to email and then they'll get taken care of the next day.
And as long as they've documented that they were having issues at the time, then there's gotta be some documentation that will help us in those situations.
I mean, I think this is the same thing, is we want to do everything we can to help our parents, but at the same time, we want to do everything we can to help our staff too. It's going to be a lot of added pressure on everyone, and at the end of the day, this is why parents have decisions to make on which is more convenient or which they feel is more safe for them and their family, but at the same time, we have to allow our staff to have a life after school, and I don't think it's going to be fair if there's added pressure to staff because they're not responding to an email at 6 or 7 o'clock, and they're trying to have dinner with their family and kids, which they get to see less than they see our kids at school, so I mean, I just think there has to be a very understanding line that's drawn, and, I think we need to be very supportive on each campus of not allowing, pressure from those who opt in digital. I mean, I think we got to provide the resources available, and at the end of the day, they've got to make that decision on what works for them and what doesn't.
And I spent a lot of my time coaching from March to May, the teachers who were going above and beyond and working at midnight, calling me at the same time. And, okay, we can get this figured out. It'll be okay. You don't have to give up your sleep, and be sick just because. But that's the dedication of everybody I work with. Everybody.
And we have purchased a lot of equipment so that direct instruction, even remotely, is available during the day. If they, especially for an older student, they can log on to algebra class and listen, or log on to biology and participate. So hopefully they'll take advantage of those opportunities to interact with the teacher during the day.
It's important and imperative that they hear live lessons. So all of the things that we taught from March to May were not as, there weren't as many new standards from March to May that kids haven't learned yet. There's a whole slew of new standards that they're going to be learning. So it is important if at all possible the kids do log on when there are those live opportunities, so that they can give that support.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Mr. Green.
I know that. I have no question. The, at what point, we got a pandemic going on right now, in a few months, we're gonna have the flu season coming up. At what point do we close the school down and do it all virtual? Do we have a plan for that?
We'll follow the direction of the state. Right now, we're not in that direction. What we can do now is, can go up to 4 weeks virtual and extend it for 4 weeks, and then that's it. No one can go beyond that. It's a one day at a time, as to whether or not we have to close a campus or close an area. It just is. It's a one day at a time.
What do we expect our hallways in junior high and high school to look like 20 classes? What are these many students?
They are operating in a one-way situation. High school is going down the hall, out and back in. They're operating in one way. And junior high has their hall divided right now with the dividers to keep the students going this way and that way. So we are doing one way and monitoring. It'll be pretty easy to monitor, and hopefully we'll get it down to a science by the time more students come back, because it is our goal and our hope that most of the students will be back before the end of the school year. That's what we hope.
Okay.
Thank you. We're gonna move on to item number 7, athletic program update, Coach Martinez. A little bit longer than our 8-minute meeting we had the other day.
Yes, it's long.
I'll try not to keep you on. Appreciate you guys having me today. Really excited today. Today we held our first sporting event in 5 months, so it's a sign of moving in the right direction. Really excited. I had 8 days of work with our kids, and I hear all the optimism, and I know there's some anxiousness and maybe some nervousness. I've been around this district for a long time, and I'll say this. I learned this in 8 days we've had our kids, and we've had to adjust the way we're doing things. Is that our kids and our staff are probably the most resilient people I've ever been around. And they adapt to change really well. And I'm very optimistic about when we get this thing started, that they won't be anything shy of excellent, because that's just the kind of kids and staff we have here. So, and I've only experienced that in 8 days. And the things that happened, we had a sporting event, we're hosting 2 other teams in volleyball. The staff did a great job of keeping everybody safe. Our kids competed very well, and it went off without a hitch. I mean, that's credit to our staff and our kids. And I'm really excited about that. And I want to give you some updates on athletics as a whole. I'll start off with updates from the DEC for non-football. For non-football as a DEC,
Can you explain to them what a DEC is?
that's a district executive committee that's made up of all the schools in the district. So that's us, that's Poth, Torrance City, Jerdenton, Poteet, Dilley, and Cotulla, as well as Lottie. And that makes up our non-football district. So we met as a district, as a committee, and we decided some of the things that we've decided to adjust. Because of this COVID situation, probably the biggest thing right now is moving Friday night volleyball games to Saturday. And that's going to allow the hosting team more resources available to help with keeping people apart, social distancing, and just the whole transition of the game. That's hard to do on a Friday night with football going on at the same time, because people are split. You split the staff, you split the resources. So we made that decision to move Friday volleyball games to Saturday. We also allow the coaches the opportunity to, if it's feasible for them, say neither one of them have a game on Friday night, a football game, and they want to play that game on Friday, they can mutually agree upon it and just let the district know that they're going to do that. The other changes we made is, as of right now, we're not going to do a junior high B team schedule for volleyball. Usually we have 4 teams, 7th and 8th, A and B teams. We're still going to host those teams. We're still going to have a B team. We're just not going to have a district schedule for B teams. We'll be responsible for finding our own games for our B teams, whether we play Divine or Lotto or play inter-squad. Those are the types of things that we're trying to do to kind of limit, trying to house everybody in one gym. We're talking about doing split sites, different things like that to try to minimize a lot of people in the gym. 50% capacity is a big deal right now. That's a mandate by UIL. We're only allowed 50% in the building, whether it's the gym or the stadium. They're only allowing 50%. So the visitor team, the district agreed that the visitor team would get 50% of the visitor side. And that's basically what we're allowed right now. And everybody's different. Everywhere we go, some people have bigger stadiums than others, so that's going to dictate the ticketing and who can come and who can't come. So that's kind of a challenge that we're going to have to work through. We also allowed each district to reserve the right to say we don't want anybody to come to our games. And like right now, Petula is the only one in our district saying that they may not allow visitors to come to the game. And so we all agreed that that would be fine. We'll leave it to every district to decide what they want. We would sell our own tickets. That's something that we're trying to do just to maintain just the whole transition of trying to give money to a different district and all that. So everybody kind of agreed that we would just sell our own tickets, even if we play in Jerdenton. I'll sell tickets to that game, and we'll keep them here in-house. And the same thing when somebody comes over here, they'll sell their own tickets and they'll keep them in-house just for this year, just to kind of limit the transactions and try to find out what money's going where and what tickets were sold. It's going to be kind of tough to do. So we decided it'd be best for us just to keep it in-house. And so that was something that we decided. As far as concession stands go, those things are just going to be very fluid situation. They're going to vary from site to site. Some people may not offer a concession stand. That's just how we're going to operate through the whole thing. We just got to be real flexible. And that's what we agreed upon, just not not having a standard of expecting something to happen, just be able to adapt and change as the time goes on. For football, DEC, the same thing. That's made up of us, both Karn City, Stockdale, Nixon, Smiley, Dilley, and now George West, as well as Karn City. I think I said Karn City already. As a district, we decided we wanted to move district up. As it's probably been made known already, we moved district up, so we had to cancel some non-district games, which was kind of tough on our kids and our community because they're pretty excited about it. We did that with the thought process of creating open dates throughout the schedule in case a team had to sit out of a game and not have a game because of COVID. We could make it up at a later date. There was an open date in between there. We went ahead and filled those dates with other teams with the understanding that if we had to reschedule a game, a district game, we played on that day, we'd cancel that game with a non-district opponent. Any questions about the DEC stuff? Good. Other items I just wanted to address real quick, I won't take much time, is tickets. Right now, we're working on doing online tickets and pre-sale only. We won't sell any tickets at the game, at the gate, and that's been agreed upon throughout the districts. No tickets will be sold at the gate to try to limit transaction as well. We're working on an online ticketing system. We have something in place right now we're really excited about that allow you to go online, buy your ticket, show it at the gate. Nobody has to change money or tickets or anything. It's all on your phone. And if we understand we have some community members who don't operate that way, that's okay. They can buy a paper ticket. We can still do that. We'll have a scanner. Sir?
Buy them here? The paper tickets, I mean.
Yeah, we'll work it out to make it, like if you need a ticket, you call me and you purchase the ticket through me and we'll print it off here at the field house for you and make sure you have the paper ticket. We'll try to make it as easy as we can for those who can't do that.
We'll give Carrie a truck enough for you.
As a DEC, we also agreed upon no passes will be allowed this year to away games, and with the limited numbers that they're allowing us to have in buildings or in the games. We talked about it here in house too. It's not a definite decision, but just really limiting on passes. But for sure, 100%, when you go to a visitor game for visitors, we travel, they won't allow you to get in with passes this year. And we'll still issue passes because that may change. Hopefully this thing gets better and all these mandates can go away and we can allow passes again at some point. But just know right now, yes, ma'am.
The passes though will not get you into any debt. You just will be able to buy a ticket.
Yes.
Or get a ticket. We'll have to have that electronic ticket.
Yes, ma'am.
Because we have to count the tickets.
It has to be accounted for. So that's part of the online system. When we get to that point where if you have a pass and you're going to get an online pass or online ticket, we'll go through that process. It's still kind of a work in progress right now, but I wanted to make you aware of that as well. Live streaming. Mr. Roberts has been great to me and helping me try to figure out this live streaming. We're going to try to offer live streaming for our community who can't come. We realize that there's a lot of aunts and uncles who want to attend games. And it just won't be possible, at least initially. So we've worked with the company that they'll come install cameras for us. And Mr. Roberts working on internet for us. And they'll live stream the football games and anything that happens in the gym, they'll live stream it right to the community members that they want to watch that. They pay a small fee, a $10 fee, and they get to watch whatever event they want for the entire month. They can buy a year pass, they can buy it month by month, but it's pretty neat to do. The camera moves by itself. You don't have to have anybody operate it. It just follows the football. It's something that's used quite often, so we're really excited about Travel's a big deal right now. We're working with transportation to make sure our kids travel safely. We met with our parents before we started 2-a-days. We were really excited about the turnout that we had. One of the things we talked about was travel. We're gonna have to increase our buses and our travel units to make sure our kids are traveling to and from games safely. We have allowed parents, if they don't feel comfortable letting their kid travel on the bus, we have allowed parents to say, hey, listen, if you want to take your kid to the game, to and from the game, you're welcome to do that, but you have to follow the bus. You have to be with us there and back. We'll stop them, we're gonna feed them, they'll get fed the same, nothing changes. They just get to ride with their parents that'll be on the bus. So we're working on that plan as well. As of right now, and we're still, like I said, this is a very fluid situation. There's nothing that's set in stone. But as of right now, we've decided not to take on band and cheerleaders to away games. And a big part of that is because there's a lot of restrictions in UIL as far as what's happening in the stands. For instance, when we put band in the stands, that counts against your 50%. And then you also have to dictate 10 feet from any kind of instrument that's blowing, air. And so that makes it really challenging. When we have home games, we can dictate a lot of things because we have control of our entire facilities. When we travel, we don't necessarily have that same leisure. And some schools have a very small, where the stands are right on the football team, the cheerleaders are right on, it's all back to back. There's nowhere to put the band. And so, as of right now, just for safety purposes, we've decided not to travel with band or the cheerleaders. Again, that's a very fluid situation and something that we hope that we can change as we go along. And it may change game to game. I may call a school district and they say, Coach, we got enough room where you guys can put them in the end zone, where you can do something with them. And then we'll say, okay, this week we will take them. And then there'll be other times where we can't do those things. And so, again, a very fluid situation, just asking our parents to have a lot of grace and mercy and understanding during this time. It's not something we want to do. We want to have it as functional as we can for all of our kids. But it's just a different time for us, and we're trying to manage through it and navigate through the uncharted waters. And as we do that, we're trying to act on best practices during this time.
And did you say that's our district or the district executive committee decided that?
No, every district has their own ability to do that.
Well, it just depends. The bands, none of the bands are present. Because the bands, there are several issues. Like he said, they take up, like our band would take up 100 of our seats. And if we only get 250, then we don't even have enough for the football team. We have 2 kids, 2 parents in the band, and 2 parents.
It's a challenge. And so, like I've talked to other districts too, and I'm not just acting on my own. I spoke to a lot of ADs. Divine's doing the same thing. Model's doing the same thing. For the most part, our entire football team is doing the same thing. Just because it's just a challenge. We don't know how it's going to look from school district to school district. And like I said, it's a fluid situation. We're not saying, hey, this is the way it's going to be for the entire year. We're just saying, hey, early on, this is how it's going to be. If we can change that as time goes on, we hope to make that change as quickly as we can.
And it could change the other way, where no one goes.
Correct. Yes, ma'am. That is true. That's all I have as far as updates go. We've had 8 really good days of practice with our kids. Our coaches have worked really hard to implement a mitigation process for our kids. We haven't had it gone without any kind of issues. So I'm really excited about that. If anybody have any questions for us?
Calling the floor for questions, Ms. Ankerslice? No. Mr. Bessa? Mr. Garza? Mr. Gentry?
Do you have any students that have tested positive?
Not as of right now. We have had some students through summer workouts. We were hosting summer workouts. They did test positive, and then we acted appropriately as far as UIL mandates us to. We did a great job of communicating that to the parents, getting in contact with anybody who would be considered in close contact with that student. And then we shut it down for a while and kind of mitigated that. And we've come up with new practices. UIL and TEA have come out with great guidelines for us to utilize. And we try to do a really good job of structuring our practice. And if you go out to our practice field out here, it looks like a polka dotted practice field because there's dots all over it. And kids understand that they know that when they're not practicing, they're on the dot. If they're not in a drill, they're on the dot. So we try to do some things like that to try to limit the spread and all those types of things. But yes, sir, we have had some during the course of summer workouts. As far as camp has gone on since we started back on August 3rd. So
Well, I saw this on Twitter today. The Texas High School Coaches Association posted this, and they had surveyed school districts around the state, and they had a response of 244 schools, which represented 65,290 applicants. And out of 65,290, as of today, 278 applicants have tested positive, but only 4 of those have been traced back to the school district. And there have been only 4 hospitalizations out of those 278, which was a percentage of 0.00425 of athletes who have tested positive that has been a part of workouts so far in the state of Texas. So I thought that was a very positive thing, which really emphasizes that it's not really just a showboat on people saying they're doing things, but that they're actually really giving an effort and trying to make sure that things are being done well. I guess one positive about volleyball and football being separated also is hopefully, we don't have to worry about bands showing up after the school songs played because we lack bus drivers or lack buses. But I'm assuming travel should be easier for y'all, as far as getting the buses that you need on time, hopefully getting where we need to be on time.
Yeah, I mean, it's, like I said, it's something we're working through right now. And we hope to, usually on Friday night, we take 1 bus. We're talking about taking 2 buses now to create some more space. We usually take a few of the school vehicles to house some of our managers or trainers or coaching staff, just so we're not all jammed on one bus. A lot of times our managers and coaching staff goes ahead of the team to set up for when our kids get there, they're prepared and then we're ready to go to receive our kids when they come.
I'm assuming, I guess,
So you're good.
with 3 brand new SUVs, I guess that's really going to help us alleviate having to take some vehicles that probably shouldn't be on the road traveling. Hopefully, we're not having to take that car that one person doesn't have to fit in. And, hopefully, I've always stated to my opinion of the school district is that, if we have these really nice vehicles, we need to make sure that we're utilizing them. And kind of like we talk about the whole ag truck situation is if, the ag director needs the truck, he should get the truck. If the AD needs 3 or 4 vehicles, I don't think they should be questioned on why. I think we should trust the people we have in charge and whatever they need, they should get. And I know you believe the same, so that's exciting, but at least we have vehicles that people can use now. So hopefully there will be no issues with you getting what is needed, and I don't think there will be, but it's exciting, and just thank you for everything that you're doing. And I know you've lost a little hair and some sleep over all of this.
Well, I did call Coach Graves the other day and say, hey man, you didn't tell me I was gonna take over during the pandemic. So, but yeah, it's been good. No, we have great kids and staff, and we're really excited to have them. I've never been more just happy to be around our kids.
And it looked like on Twitter, volleyball did pretty good.
Yeah, they did. They competed really well. Lost a tight game at the very end, and George West put them in 5. So they looked really well. They come along. We had about 40 volleyball girls out this year, and so it's really exciting. I'm really excited about it.
On the first scrimmage is Wednesday for football?
August 20th. It's on Thursday, next Thursday in Bandera. And then we travel 28th to Jerrington, and then we host Lotto for the Lotto game here before we start this year.
And what will be protocol for, I guess, board members requesting the tickets?
We're not there.
She doesn't know that the superintendent gets Mr. Bessa, and that's kind of the tag team on the way.
They tagged us.
Doesn't know that.
Honestly, truthfully, the way the online ticketing system has worked out for us is that it allows us a lot of versatility and a lot of areas of control as far as releasing tickets. So just kind of some of the things that we've worked on is saying the first group of people we're going to allow those tickets open to are to our kids and to their parents. And we're going to have a set amount that they can have, and we're going to issue those out. And then whatever we have left over, then we're going to try to distribute those out as core to the doctor on those issues.
Any other questions? Thank you for the update, appreciate it. We're going to move on to item 8, public comments. Public comment 8A and 8B. 8A is not agenda items, 8B is agenda items. Ms. Harold, do we have anybody signed up for, is it for 8A or 8B? 8A. Can you bring the list to me, please? Oh, it's right here, I'm sorry. Grab the list. We do have one parent that has signed up. Ms. Juarez is going to speak on cheerleaders for away games. Reminder, you have 5 minutes. And you can go ahead. Thank you for coming.
Hi.
If you could just speak into the microphone, please.
I think I'm loud enough that I don't think I need it.
Yeah, it transmits to the top.
Okay. Well, I was just wanted to voice my concerns with the cheerleaders not attending the away games. I know, like Coach Martinez said, the reasons why these girls pay a lot of money. Some different than others, depending if what they have from the year before and whatnot. I have even, voiced maybe the parents driving the girls, like Coach Martinez said, following the buses. This is my cheerleader. She's a junior this year, co-captain. But she's also in the band. So, we kind of play both sides of it. And I see the band situation. There are a lot of them. As far as the cheerleaders, they're down on the track. They're no closer to the stands than the volleyball players are to each other in the courts. They're not playing with face masks. I believe their sponsor actually purchased shields for their faces, the clear ones that you've seen some people wear. I believe maybe some were purchased for teachers as well in the classrooms. To, the 10 feet or 6 feet distance from the stands, just to go ahead and block while they're yelling and things like that. They're not doing stunts, they're not touching each other, So they've paid quite a bit of money to cheer, but they're now being shut out from the away games as of right now and only cheering at 4 home games. She still has items from last year that they went ahead and just transferred over to this year. I still forked out $400 for her to cheer. That's just a returning cheerleader. That's not even the freshmen that come on this year that paid more than that. And it's a big cost. So I'm just like, this was literally brought all to us within the last week that we've got this information. So I'm just one parent. I don't know what other parents have, found out this information, if it's been relayed to them from their daughters, from the cheer coach, I'm not too sure. I just know what I asked and my concerns. And so I don't know, I understand Coach Martinez has already talked to the other districts, but if the push was for football and the push was for volleyball and all the other sports, they fall under athletics as well this year. So where's, the push for them to be allowed to go and cheer and support their Natalia Mustangs and everything. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or.
Not really supposed to get into conversation because it is an on-agenda item.
Okay.
Obviously, our athletic director is here, our superintendent is here. I'm sure she took down some notes.
And I actually had text Coach Martinez today to set up a conference, but when I realized what day it was, I was like, well,
Well,
let me just
and
go.
just kind of clarification, this Callie, I appreciate the comments, and you're always very vocal and very involved, and you want what's best, and I understand that, and I appreciate that, and I'm just encouraging you to do the championing and to do the right thing by going through your protocols, and of course, usually it's here if, we don't get anywhere, and same thing is, just a reminder with anything we've discussed tonight is through all of this, and there'll be benefits. Nobody is doing anything to try and purposely not benefit the student, because at the end of the day, the less we can do to try and distract, it's not going to be beneficial for us to not allow the band. Nobody wants to see the band cheer. It's not something where anybody is going to make a decision.
But again, that's understandable. There's 96 band members. There's been quite a few that have pulled out already this year. There's 96, then plus the helpers and then, the 3 or 4 band, directors, I get that. I understand that. And I'm sure there's a majority of the parents, again, would follow the bus or whatever needs to be done in order for the girls and for our money to be well spent.
I'll just encourage you to follow the protocol and to meet with the appropriate channels and then hopefully everything will work out the best.
Sounds good.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item 9, consent agenda. Reminder, board, you have the consent agenda in front of you. It's for line A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, as well as those that I mentioned. At this time, I can open the floor for a motion to approve or a motion for the consent agenda. If anybody would like to take anything out. Okay, I'm sorry, 10 is actually a part of the consent agenda. What we can do is we can just act on that separately. So we'll do 9A through G. Like I mentioned, anybody can pull out an individual item if need be. If not, I'll open the floor for a motion on the consent agenda as presented. Got a motion by Mr. Benson, do I have a second? Second by Mr. Gentry. Any further discussion on the consent agenda items as presented? If not, I'll open the floor for a motion. I'll open the floor for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, the same. Motion passes 5-0. Move on to item 10, consider and approve a purchase of student Chromebooks that exceeds $25,000. That item is also part of your packet. I'm going to make a motion that we approve the administration's recommendation as presented on this item. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Bessa. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, the same. Motion passes 5-0. We're going to go into closed session at this time. We're going to go into the blue room under 11A, pursuant to section 551.071, 551.074, the Texas Government Code, consultation with legal counsel regarding pending and threatened litigation, including EEOC charge number 451-2020-02286. 11B, pursuant to Texas Government Code, chapter 551.071, consultation with legal counsel regarding legal issues pertaining to court resolution adoption on March 20, 2020 related to COVID-19 and the resolution for the 2020-2021 school year. And 11C, pursuant to Texas Government Code, chapter 551.071, attorney consultation regarding legal issues related to implementation of the United Families First Coronavirus Act, FFCRA. We're going into the blue room along with our legal counsel at 8:47 p.m.
Still recording.
Extra on purpose, cutting the grass, mowing, raking, lifting. You did it. I'm ready.
Gonna come back in open session at 9:16 p.m. We're gonna move on to item 12, this is, consideration of possible action regarding resolution and settlement of EEOC charge number 451-2020-02286. I'm gonna make a motion that the board authorize the superintendent of schools attorney to negotiate a settlement as discussed in closed session concerning EEOC charge number 451-2002, filed by Samuel Lunell, and authorize the superintendent to execute all settlement documents on behalf of the district. Got a second by Mr. Gentry. Is there further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. Motion passes 5-0. Going to move on to the next item. 12B, consider take possible action regarding the adoption of resolution authorizing the superintendent to act on behalf of the board related to COVID-19 issues for the 2021 school year. I'm going to make a motion that the board resolution previously adopted on March 20th, 2020, and that the board delegate authority to the superintendent to act on behalf of the board regarding the COVID-19 pandemic for the 2021 school year as presented. I further move that a copy signed of the resolution be attached to the minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Got a motion by myself, second by Mr. Bezza. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion passes 5-0. We'll move on to the next item, 12C. Consider take possible action issues related to the implementation of Leave of the Families First Coronavirus Act, FFCRA. And I'm going to make a motion that the board go with the recommendation by administration, which is option 1, to authorize the superintendent to implement the FFCRA with no supplementation with employees accrued state and local leave and no intermittent leave. Got a second by the president. Got a motion on myself, a second by Ms. Bankers Flax. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Neely. And we're going to move on to item 12B, consider approve the 2020-21 tax rate for the ISD ordinance. And I'm going to find that. We're going to make a motion, we approve the following ordinance setting the tax rate on this date. We need the ISD Board of Trustees hereby set the tax rate per $100 valuation of the district for the tax rate for the tax year 2020 at a total rate of $1.3332 to be assessed and collected by the duly specified assessor and collectors as follows: 1.0037 for the purpose of maintenance and operations, and 0.3295 for the purpose of payment of interest or principal on debts. Interest and receiving this tax rate will raise less taxes for maintenance and operation than last year's tax rate. Even though tax rate will effectively be lowered by 6.05% from the year prior, and the lower taxes for maintenance and operations on a $100,000 home by approximately $65. I move that the total property tax rate be decreased by the adoption of a tax rate of 1.3332, which is effectively a 6.19% decrease in the tax rate. Got a motion by myself, a second by Mr. Bessa. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye, all opposed the same. Motion passes 5-0. And I'll move on to the final item on the agenda, which is item missing action, final item adjournment. I'll open the floor for a motion. Motion by Ms. Vanderslice, go a second. Second by Mr. Bessa. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye, all opposed the same. Motion passes. We adjourn at 9:21 p.m. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. We will have a special